esteemed colleagues, once again, good afternoon. Thanks for everybody who joined us or watches our press briefing in the online mode. We are within the pilot project Speaker of the Peaceful Life. We are going to talk about Crimea, 2 years of occupation. Our speakers are Tamila Tasheva, the founder and coordinator of the civil initiative Krym SOS, Crimea SOS, also Yevhenia Andriyuk, deputy coordinator of Tamila, as far as I understand. So, a short introductory speech, and then our speakers will go. So, 2 years have elapsed in the so-called referendum in March 2014 about the independence of Crimea, independence from Ukraine, and their accession to the Russian Federation. The deputies of the Crimean parliament declared their independence in those days when the parliament was actually captured or seized by the Russian occupationists. And later, a few days later, in Moscow, they held the official ceremony of accession of Crimea to Russia. And by this legitimate and legal action, Crimea was annexed from Ukraine and joined the Russian Federation. Over the years of occupation of the Crimea, about 20,000 people were forced to leave their native nukes, and despite the increase of the pensions and the social payments, those remain the promises. Over the last 2 years on the peninsula, they record a lot of violations of the human rights and the ethnic discrimination. I would like to ask our esteemed guests to say whether the life of the ordinary people of the Crimea changed beside the change of the flag colors. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, and thanks to everybody. In fact, it's a pleasure to speak here. In Kherson, we have our office, regional office, Crimea SOS, which deals with providing assistance to the IDPs. That's why it's a double pleasure for us to speak here. Well, actually, we do not want to talk a lot. We prefer to have a dialogue with you, to give a chance to ask our questions. So, over the 2 years of occupation of Crimea by the Russian Federation, if we are going to talk about the social-economic rights for the people who reside in this occupied peninsula, in fact, nothing has changed. On the contrary, situation deteriorated. When the occupation started, the pensioners and the employees were paid a big amount of money, and then they stopped to provide this kind of surplus or payment to the people, and they actually receive today the same size of these salary or pensions as compared to in the times of Ukraine, and that's why this causes a lot of questions among the people. The issue of having access to some mainly required things, and maybe my colleague will talk more about that. And the number of the violations of human rights increased because over the last 2 years of occupation, the record number of the violation of human rights exceeds the number of 130, starting from the violations associated with illegal searches or the detention of the people or deprivation of their right to live. In a big number of the criminal cases launched against the Crimean people, 13 of them are missing, and no investigation actions are in place today. 7 people were tortured and then killed, 3 of them at the beginning of the occupation, and the rest of them over the last 2 years, they disappeared and then were found tortured to death. Russian, the occupationist authority violates those basic human rights. And that's why I would like, if you're talking about the sphere of the international rights, I would like my colleague to add what has been violated. Thanks, Tamila. Those violations which were mentioned by Tamila, actually, as a rule, we categorize or classify into 2 big groups. Violation of the civil political rights, And speaking about the whole spectrum mentioned by Tamila, we are talking about the persuasion of major minor ethnic groups, Crimean Tatars or Ukrainians, and it's important we are talking not about the outstanding people. Any person from the street suffer from that if they are pro-Ukrainian, so to say. And the second big group violations or deterioration of the standards of life in the Crimea, which is the first obligation, commitment on the part of the Russia in the Crimea according to the international law to support the standards of life in the minimum at the previous level, starting from the forced citizenship, which the Russian Federation introduced without asking anybody's opinion, which led to the restriction of the rights, many rights. You know, the Crimean citizens were issued the Russian Federation passports, the Crimean passports, and they cannot travel anywhere but to Russia. You know, this is a big restriction, and all the way up to the economic restrictions, like on the lack of power supply or let's say water supply, and Russia had already over those 2 years had to take care of. And one of the biggest things which actually we are talking about international violations, this is militarization of the Crimea and turn the peninsula of Crimea in some of the militarized island of the Russia, and we are eyewitness that a lot of maneuvers or exercise take place there, and a lot of troops have been concentrated there. I don't know, maybe this kind of the action of intimidation. Okay, thank you, friends. We have journalists from the Kherson region in this audience. Maybe should you have any questions, you can ask your questions and put them to our speakers. Yeah, there are some questions. Sergey, can you bring this microphone just for a second to share your microphone to those people? So please introduce yourself and ask your questions. Of late, we heard on the part of the authorities the word that sooner or later Crimea will return as a part of Ukraine. And you do study this problem. Can you judge upon the sentiments or the, let's say, moods of the people? You contact the local population, I understand. So perhaps you have a better understand this problem. So your personal feeling, can we be optimistic about this issue? Can you introduce yourself? The regional organization of the National Union of Journalists of Ukraine, Lyubotenko. Thank you for the question. The issue of reintegration of the Crimea is a very complex issue. We always, of course, say that first of all we have to liberate this territory of the Crimea. We have to talk about the status of the Crimea, what kind of format it has. It'll have either the Autonomous Republic or Crimean Tatar Republic within the as part of the Ukraine, or some kind of the dual protectorate, but we can talk about that and that after the occupation. But speaking about the sentiments or the moods of the local population, it changed a lot after the so-called referendum, after de facto accession of the Crimea, or when the Crimea was de facto put under control of the Russian Federation, because many people have been disappointed. A lot of people, they just waiting for something, you know, for some changes. I myself, I am a former citizen of Crimea, and I understand very well the situation in the Crimea. We still have a lot of volunteers working or active on the territory of the Crimea. Always the Crimean population, they used to be rather, you know, they were absolutely indifferent where they had to live, in which country, in which state. In Ukraine, good if it's good for them to live in Ukraine. Russia, okay, if it would be good for them to live in Russia. I always give this example about the weather in Malinovka, when just some movie, you know, the people just changed their military headgear just depending on what country has the control over this territory. So we are talking about the general national or local elections. The electorate, I mean the people, was minimum number coming to the polling stations. They were absolutely indifferent who is going to be at the helm of the government, So the results of the elections were always doubtful. But if we are talking about reintegration, we will have to talk a lot with those people. We will have to take care of different peaceful or peacemaking, peacekeeping, let's say, procedures. And this process is going to be very complicated on the let's say the major territory Ukraine and the people who are living there. If you're talking about this problem today, we have to send the messages, convey the messages to them, that we know that at a certain period of time you may be selected erroneous way of development, but you're still our citizens, and nobody is going to accuse you, to charge you with those actions. Only those will be subject to charging or accusation. Those people who actually became the committed the high treason, crime. But those people who work as librarians or let's say teachers or even principals in high school, they are concerned what the punishment they will face, would they face any consequences when they return back to Ukraine? People start to ask what is going to happen to them. So from here, from this part of Ukraine, we have to send them very clear signals. And when we are talking about the strategy of the occupation of the Crimea, those issues have to be, let's say, elaborated today, including the issue of the status of Crimea after the occupation. The only thing which I would like to add to that, the political process of return Crimea back to Ukraine, there is nothing new. It's not going to be an easy one. First of all, because of the positional stance of the Russian Federation and what we have heard of late from our international partners. So, if the Russia is prepared to so some compromise for some, let's say, concessions regarding the Donbass, but they are not prepared to do that. About Crimea, they say Crimea is our territory, but in order to make it happen, we have to. Ukraine has to occupy a very active position, both the state and the civil society, and we believe it's our responsibility. The more we talk about that, the more we put the state to do something about that, especially in the international scene, the sooner we will reach the situation where we can return the Crimea back to Ukraine. Well, our international partners often say that there is a lack of specific actions on the part of the authorities in Ukraine. Thank you for your information. There is another question, Yevhenia Andriyuk, Regional Radio Tauria, FM channel. Scythian broadcast and radio broadcasting studio. Short replica. I understand among our delegation there are people who do not know about this historical fact that Sevastopol is not the city of Russian sailors. Kolchak back in 1918, speaking before the Black Sea sailors, he said that the best part of the Black Sea sailors are Ukrainians whose share is more than 80%. And we were talking about the regiments who participated in the Crimean War in 1854. There were a lot of Ukrainian regiments, which is actually proven by the specific inscription on one of the churches. So the people, not all of them know about those misfortunes or all the facts of life. So we have to do something about that. First of all, the media has to take care of that, specifically journalists who do not even have the proper understanding how much the Ukrainian language is important to convey this information to the local population. You know that in Genichevsk district there is no radio broadcasting, no TV broadcasting. Do you do something about that? Do you lobby in the resolution of this problem? Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, we know only too well about the situation. And we already mentioned that we have our Kherson office. We monitor what's going on in the administrative border between the Crimea and the rest of Ukraine. and a lot of the different social activists inform us about that. We are always we face the bitter criticism on the part of the authorities, that the Minister of Information and the National Council of the Information, etc., etc. They had to know about that actually, and they had to do something about that, to take specific steps to resolve this problem, to install the retransmission stations, because we know the radio and TV channels, radio stations of Ukraine, they do not receive this signal, and that's why the part of the Kherson region do not receive this part of this content. On the contrary, the Russian Federation radio broadcasting TV channels work very well, and that's why the people having this kind of unilateral propaganda-like information, they would not have not only correct but at least neutral perception what's going on in Ukraine or in the occupied peninsula. Of course, we do something about that. We try to lobby this issue, but unfortunately, to our utmost regret, not everything depends upon us to advocate to a maximum extent this issue, and they have to step in because we do not have the necessary tools to make it happen on our own. I mean, nothing has been done to this date, as far as I know. Last Friday, there was a meeting between a representative of the Ministry of Information and then Sergei Kostynsky, who is member of the National Council on the Radio and TV Broadcasting issues, and they were discussing this problem. They were mentioning this problem, but so far, as far as I know, the problem has not been resolved. But at least the good news is they start to discuss the problem as a problem which has to be resolved. We still have 5 minutes to go. So we have time for one or two short questions. Kherson News, we are talking about the serious occupation of the peninsula. We say that the information policies pursued serious foreign policy on territory of Ukraine. But what I'm asking you, speaking about the territory of the Crimea, do you have some kind of communication with the local residents? If you're talking about the occupation of Crimea when it's going to return back to Ukraine, they have to know towards what end it's worthwhile for them to move, to avoid some different situation. Unfortunately, on the occupied peninsula, we do not have a single independent media a media entity which would inform the local people what's going on. But there are a lot of bloggers who use the nicknames and they write for different Ukrainian publications. And, I understand what you're talking about. I'm talking about just one tool using the mass media tools, and other possibilities, communication, direct communication with the people. But you have to understand the situation available for the local population of Crimea today, especially we are talking about the pro-Ukrainian active population or the civil activists, and any people or any person who is active in this respect, they find themselves under very serious control on the part of local authorities. In the respect of who this person is, he or she faces the risk of being visited, so to say, by the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation. They can be incarcerated or just disappear somewhere. Unfortunately, in the territory of Crimea, we have the territory of fear, where people are afraid of even mentioning such issues. They do not discuss those issues even between themselves, only with the close relatives. They do not discuss this issue with their neighbors or the passers-by or the passengers in the streetcars or trolleybuses, bus, whatever. So the issue of reintegration of the Crimea to Ukraine and what is going on in Ukraine in positive aspect, and that we do not. One of the major myths which is spread over the territory of Crimea is that we do not have warfare on the territory of Crimea. That's why it's impossible to say about that in the Crimea. It's important to talk about that here in the rest of Ukraine, because people who have the satellite dishes, they can watch the Ukrainian TVs or Ukrainian radio broadcasts, and they can spread that information on other people. And the reason is that we have to end our press conference. I have the last question to our speakers. On February 15th, the head of the illegal prosecutor's office, Natalia Poklonsky in the Crimea, she wrote in her Facebook about the prohibition of Majlis based on the specific law article in the local legislation. There were several sittings already, the latest on the 17th of March, and they are going to continue this sitting in April. Is it possible to ban or to prohibit the Majlis in Tatars Majlis, because this is a public organization? And the second question, if they do that, so what is going to happen to the Crimean Tatar people in the country where there is the right or some laws? It would be impossible to ban or to forbid, let's say, to prohibit the body of the legitimate body of the local population. But you were talking about Crimea as a part of Russian Federation. It's possible, because not only they can forbid or they prohibit such bodies. We are witness over the last 2 years and to pass the court, the judicial rulings against the people who were somewhere not in the country. I'm talking about the Lina Kostenko, for example. So we do not have an optimist forecasting, and especially if you take in consideration the verdict passed for Nadia Savchenko. Most likely we are going to have the result. They will have the result which the local illegitimate prosecutor's office wants to have. So most likely the activities of Majlis will be forbidden on the territory of the Crimea and the Russian Federation. So the Majlis people, they understand all this. They are prepared for this verdict. And the chairman of Majlis, Rafat Chubarov, was talking to other activists, Mustafa Gazimiliev. And what they're going to do in this case, almost every Saturday, the leaders of Majlis, they have their meetings in Kiev. They have a Skype communication with the members of Majlis in the Crimea. They discuss the situation. They prepare some kind of the crisis measures to be taken. Most likely, a certain delegation, there will be a certain delegation of certain authorities to those people who live in this part of Ukraine who were forced to come here, because, in fact, for the leaders of Majlis to work or to operate on the territory of Crimea is almost impossible, next to impossible, but they cannot forbid the activities of this organ, of this body, because this is the body of the direct election. And there are many delegates of Kurultai who are also representatives of the Crimean Tatar people. So it won't be possible to forbid the activities or the action of this body. It will acquire maybe new formats or new forms. Valentin Pugachev, my name is, the deputy head of the Ukraine UCMC. So Tamila Tasheva, founder and coordinator of the civil initiative Crimea SOS, and Yevhenia Andriyuk, deputy coordinator of the civil initiative Crimea SOS. Just mind your step. Thank you for coming here. And if I'm not just, well, see again, I believe that we'll be able to arrange similar meetings with you in the near future. Thank you again.